Well, greetings again. Here we are at lesson 29, and I've entitled this lesson, The Big Picture. Because if you're in business, one of the things that we were always taught, at least from the old school that I attended, the School of Hard Knocks, is that you have to have a picture of what it is you want to accomplish and what your goals and ambitions are. That's something bigger than your capacity to perform. And one of the worst things that can happen to a man in business is that he has such a small esteem of himself, or such a small picture of the overall scope and magnitude of his business or of his enterprise, that he always stays rinky-dink and podunk, and he always fails to achieve, or he never does achieve the kind of greatness or success that he could have achieved if he had simply gotten to a point in his life when he understood and he could see a big enough picture out there so that when he got turned loose on the world, that he could accomplish something that was great or something that meant something. Now, I'm not saying that someday I'm going to become the President of the United States, because probably I'll never become President. More than likely it's because I don't think I would take the job if you offered it to me. A fellow named Sherman once made a famous quotation on a big picture like that, in which he said, if I'm nominated, I won't run, and if I was elected, I wouldn't serve. And I have the same opinion of the presidency. But nevertheless, for each and every one of us who are seeking our freedoms and are seeking a measure of self-respect, a status of free man, a status that was set up under our Constitution, there have to be goals and standards to which we adhere, and to which we will not deviate. And that's what I want to talk to you about in this lesson 29. And in order to do that, I think if I tell you a few stories that have been success stories in the past, in which we have absolutely defeated our adversaries, and the method that we've used to defeat our adversaries, and if we take a look at some other great men of history who have defeated their adversaries, and we apply their strategies and procedures to what we're trying to accomplish today, we learn from the examples of the past. My philosophy has been, and I picked this up, I think, from one of our famous elder statesmen, that if we fail to learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. I not only believe it, I practice it. And since I've been practicing this for the last 5 years, to this moment in time, I haven't been defeated in the courtroom. That's not to say that I'm not going to be, and it's not to say that I can't be. It's just to say that at this moment in time I haven't been, and neither have any of our students. And we have addressed this problem of victory versus defeat seriously, and we've worked out a certain set of stratagems, or we've looked at history and we've said, this is what works and this is what doesn't. And when we find a technique that doesn't, we like to tell our students about it. And when we find a technique that wins, we want others to emulate it. Because the name of the game is winning. And anything short of total victory is something less than victory. I think it was General MacArthur that said that something to the effect that in war there is no substitute for victory. And when you're going into the courtroom, there are only winners and losers. There's nothing in between. You're going to win or you're going to lose. Many of the cases that have come down, and especially the case that comes to my mind at this moment of John Lilburn in 1637, were won by inauspicious men who went into the courtroom with high ideals and with faith and beliefs in what it was that they were trying to accomplish, or what it was they believed in, and they would not deviate from that belief or that faith. We have a man now in the Ada County Jail. I'm going to leave his name out, although I don't think he would mind. Let's call his name, we'll call him Rick. Rick is a young fellow about 25 or 6 years old who has a good job, probably pays him 30,000 Federal Reserve notes a year, and he's very secure. He's not married. He makes plenty of money. But the issue of the income tax came to him, and he decided that the income tax was being inappropriately applied to him in his particular circumstance. He's come to school, he's graduated, and the State Tax Commission decided that they wanted him to fill out a 1040 form and to file the state income tax. Now, we have developed over a course or a period of time a philosophy in accord with the Supreme Court of the United States pursuant to Bruchaber, Connors, Eisner, and a number of other cases in which there is a distinct difference between compensation and wages and profit or gain, which is called income in the Eisner case. Now, once the man decides that this is his position to take, he becomes the irresistible force, and the government becomes the immovable object. Now, this man today, as I shoot this tape, is in jail. Now, he hasn't been there a long time. He's been there about 2 weeks, maybe 15 or 16 days. The question is, how long will he stay in jail rather than fill out that form? Will it be 1 month? Will it be 6 months, or a year, or 5 years, or 10? I don't know. But whatever it takes to achieve victory is the price that he must be willing to pay to achieve that victory. And if at any time he decides, well, I've had enough, I'm going to fill out this 1040 form, he loses the game. If at any time the government fills out the form, or, excuse me, if the government says, okay, we're going to let you out of jail without filling out the form, then he's the victor. Now, there's a number of ways that we count victories here, so let's run over those and let's see whether or not this fellow Rick can be a winner and whether or not he's a winner up to this moment in time. If you go into court and the jury finds you guilty, and when it comes time for sentencing, as in a particular case that I'm thinking of at the moment, I had a judge once tell me, I'm going to fine you $200, sentence you to 35 days in jail. Okay. What is it exactly that you wanted me to pay that $200 in? And I went through the money issue, and this particular judge said, well, I'm going to suspend the $200. I said, okay, now I have a stay of execution pending appeal, and I'd like to serve it on the court, and so I served it in open court. Are you going to put me in jail in violation of Argersinger versus Hamlin, since I haven't had counsel at every meaningful hearing in this case until I've had an opportunity to perfect my appeal? Mr. Gordon, I'm going to grant your stay of execution, or the execution of the sentence pending your appeal. All right? Now, there's a victory to that moment in time. We put the appeal into the process, and typically what happens, the appeal just dies over in the district court. A year from now, I'll mark that down over here in my X's and O's, and I'll call that a victory. In 5 years, I have yet to pay $1 worth of fines or serve a day in jail in connection with a conviction. Now, it's for that reason that in all of these traffic cases, notion EPA cases, some of them we've had dismissed, some of them we've been found not guilty, that is when the court has dismissed. Some of them the juries have found us guilty. And when that happens, the appeals process comes into play. Now let me show you another victory. Remember the lady in Birmingham, Alabama in 1964? She got on the front of the bus and she lost in the magistrate's court, the district court, the appeals court, the state supreme court, the district court, the circuit court of appeals, and she finally won at the Supreme Court of the United States. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Do we credit her with 6 losses and 1 win, or do we credit her with 1 win for an entire case? Well, the way we keep score here at our school is that lady won the case. She was never a loser at any stage of the proceedings so long as she maintained her appealable issues. If at any time she had fouled up in the paperwork, however, and could not continue on, the question would come up, well, what's the penalty? Well, if she went to jail or paid a fine, then she lost the case. But if at any time she lost the case, or so, let's go on up, let's say, to the Circuit Court of Appeals. If the Circuit Court of Appeals refused to listen to her case, and she went back to Birmingham, she couldn't go any further up the line. The Supreme Court denied certiorari, and she was fined $100, and she didn't pay the $100, she'd be a winner because she did just exactly what she said she was going to do. I'm going to ride the front of the bus, and I'm not going to allow you to punish or intimidate me into doing it. Now let me show you a typical case of a loss. We had one student that took a few lessons, and this young lady was, she's a nice young lady and very bright, but rather timid. And this is one of the problems that we always face, and that's the timid people who have been intimidated and browbeaten probably all of their lives. And she got into a little scrape with obstructing and delaying an officer in the course of his duty. And the prosecutor, wanting to dispose of the case, said, here's what I'm going to do. If you'll plead guilty to some lesser charge, I think it was obstructing or whatever it was, we'll recommend no fine, that you pay the court costs of $11.50, and you don't have to go to trial. And she accepted that. She went in, she pled guilty, paid $11.50, and she walked out. Now there's a loss. It's a loss because the government will intimidate people, and they do it in this way. They'll say, okay, for only $11.50 you can lose, but if we go to trial, we're going to fine you $300 and put you in jail for 6 months, which I think is the maximum penalty for that. Well, first of all, never is the maximum penalty on a first offense, you know, the full $300 ever imposed. And to my knowledge, no one's ever been put in jail for 6 months because of a first offense, although that's the maximum penalty. So if she had tried the case, it would have cost them about $1,500. They couldn't have fined her more than $100 to $150. Sentenced her to probably 30 days in jail, probably suspended 25 of that. And with a stay of execution, she could have put that issue into appeal, which would have cost the government ultimately somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000. And about 3 years from now, the Supreme Court of the United States could have denied Sertorci. And at that point, we still don't know if she would have won or lost, because if she doesn't spend the 5 days in jail and doesn't pay the $100 or $150 fine, and remember, this $100 now becomes a money issue. What did you want me to pay you in? And are you going to punish me and put me in debtor's prison because I can't pay it? The debtor's prison issue comes up, and so after you've been to Washington and back, now the new issue is, how do I pay for this? You know, you can pull victory from defeat by using your head a little bit. On the other hand, you can be intimidated into giving up before you've even begun to fight. And I think it was John Paul Jones, you know, that was faced with certain defeat in a certain naval battle, in which he said, well, I haven't gotten really into the battle yet, so since I haven't really started to fight, I think we'll keep this up for a while. And finally, he prevailed. My experience has shown me that most of the defeats that we have seen over the years have come from people who simply have been unable or unwilling to fight. And the reason I use unable is sometimes a person is in a circumstance or situation where he can't afford to lose his job, he can't afford to go to jail, he's got a wife and 5 kids, and it's for that reason that he'll go ahead and pay and plead guilty so that he doesn't have the confrontation. In such a case, he shouldn't be in the fight to start with. Now, I want to tell you about Rick's case here, because this could happen to you, and it probably is going to happen to a lot of you because it's a tax case. And if it's going to happen to you, you need to pick the turf that you're going to fight the war on. As an example, from time to time we find that you'll be charged with a crime in Rock Springs, Wyoming, and you live in Boise, Idaho. That's not a good place to let them pick the fight and the battle. Now, based upon the question of extradition, you may or may not want to pay any fines in some other state. That's another issue. But if it's a long ways from home, it may be better if you don't. I picked a case here in Idaho one time that I had to commute about 75 miles to the courtroom, and I did that about 10 times. And I decided at that point in time that I didn't think that I would fight any more battles. 75 miles from home. But in this case, Rick picked the battlefield right here in Boise, Idaho. And here's basically the way the case came down. The first thing that happened was that they sent him a letter and said, "You haven't filed." He sent him a letter back and said, "Very astute observation, gentlemen. That's true. I haven't filed because I'm not a taxpayer." They sent him another letter, "But you were a taxpayer." "Yes, that's true. I used to be a taxpayer. But I changed my status and now I'm a free man." To which they then got his W-2 forms and said, "Well, you had $25,000 or whatever it was in income." To which he wrote a letter back and said, "Wrong. I had $25,000 in compensation." To which they said, "That was $25,000. To which he said, "No, it wasn't. They've never paid me dollars. They've always paid me trade credits in a private corporation." And so the letters went back and forth, and the issue was set in cement. He went into an administrative hearing, stated his position in spades, demanded all of his rights, and set his rights issues down in the administrative hearing to take it to Washington. They took him into, first of all, the district court, magistrate's division, the lowest division we have, in which a magistrate determined that the $25,000 was in fact income pursuant to statute. Now, Rick said, "No, the statute does err, and you do err, Judge, not understanding the law. Therefore, I want to appeal." Now, there was a strategic error made here. Once the order came down, that is, a judicial determination from the magistrate came down, it should have been appealed, and he failed to appeal it. So there's a technical foible in the proceedings, and that's our fault. Now, once the decision came down, it moved up to the district court, and the district court judge ordered him to fill out the 1040 form. Okay? Now he has a court order, and he filled out the 1040 form pursuant to the court's order. He put in zeros where it was appropriate, not applicable, none. He signed it at the bottom, signed under threat, duress, and coercion, under court order. And I think he put a little statement on there by affidavit that he was compelled to fill this out, and that his position was that he had no income and that he wasn't a taxpayer, and that he was compelled to do this under threat, duress, and coercion, and threat of jail. He took it in and filed it. Now, at this moment in time, you know, it's, so to speak, the gauntlet is hurled down, isn't it? Now, the government can't let him get away with this, because if they let him get away with it, it sets a horrible precedent for everybody else out there. And so, from the government's vantage point, and this is the vantage point of every tyrant, whether it's Joe Stalin or Adolf Hitler, or whether it's the tax commission in Idaho, or whether it's the President of the United States, you're sitting here with a certain amount of power and glory and authority, like Caesar in ancient Rome or Nebuchadnezzar in ancient Babylon, you know. Here's this peasant down here who's deviating from the norm. What are we going to do? So they brought up a show cause hearing as to why he shouldn't be held in contempt of court. So Rick went to work and he filed about 20 pages and said, first of all, this is an ex post facto law, and raised 4 or 5 other major constitutional questions. Now, this particular judge, and I don't know the motives of the judge, and I'm not going to impute motives here, for whatever reason, determined that he was in contempt of court because he did not fill out the 1040 form with the appropriate numbers. Now remember, he did not fill out a Fifth Amendment return. He filled out the return and he answered every question, and to my knowledge, the term Fifth Amendment never appeared on that form, and if it did, it wasn't more than once or twice on any particular issue. Perhaps he used the Fourth Amendment right to privacy 2 or 3 times, I'm not sure. But the real question, as I observed it when I was in the courtroom, was that you didn't put the numbers in here from your W-2 form. Now, another strategic error was made here, because Rick did not argue and set into cement his position, because, as I noted later, why didn't you ask some questions like, let me ask you a question, Your Honor. Are you going to throw me in jail for contempt of court because I didn't file a tax return or because the tax return that I did file did not have the answers that you wanted on it. Now that compels the judge to answer the age-old question, are you still beating your wife on Wednesday? Because if she says, well, I'm going to put you in jail because you didn't file a return, that's not true because it's a matter of record that he did. If she says, well, I'm going to put you in jail because I didn't like your answers, then the precedent that's being set is everybody can be put in jail if you don't put the right lies on the paper. Now, he didn't do that, but I want to bring it to your attention so that you will remember to do that. Remember reason, logic, and common sense. Anytime somebody puts something in front of you and says sign, what's the first thing you do? Why? Well, because if you don't sign that, I'm not going to give you what you want. Okay. I don't want anything from you. Goodbye. I'll buy it somewhere else. To illustrate that fact, some radio advertiser came in and we were going to put something on the radio, and they brought out this broadcast advertisement, and Bob looked at it and said, well, what do you want? I want you to sign this. He said, have you been paid? Well, yeah, I've got your $200 right here. Well, if you've got the $200 right there, why do you want me to sign the contract? The only reason for signing the contract is so that he can enforce the collection of the money, isn't it? Well, if he's already been paid, then you don't need a contract. All right? And the same thing is going to apply in the courtroom. If the judge says, well, I'm going to put you in jail for contempt. Well, what was it that I did that's contemptuous? And if you can tell me what it is that I did that is contemptuous, give me an opportunity to correct that. Well, I'm going to put you in jail for contempt because you didn't fill out this form. Oh. Are you going to put me in jail because I'm a functional illiterate and I can't fill out government forms? Are you mad at me because I'm dumb? I don't think you should put me in jail and punish me because I can't fill out the form. If the government wants me to fill out the form, why don't you order Mr. Von Tegen to fill out the form and then let me look at it and see if it's true or not? If there are some lies on here, I'll tell Mr. Von Tegen where the mistakes are. You see how that would come down? Now, that didn't happen, and so Rick missed a good opportunity. Now, whenever you make a mistake, you recover by paper. He recovered on his writ of habeas corpus. Now, here's the position of the government at this moment in time. You've put a man in jail. He hasn't been convicted of any crime. He's being held in solitary confinement. He said plainly on the record, I told you the truth on the form I filed. If I were to fill it out any other way, it would not be true, and therefore I couldn't sign it. Remember that the form is signed under penalty of perjury. If I've lied, why don't you charge me with perjury? And if I haven't lied, why don't you let me go? Why are you punishing me for telling the truth? You see, the government's position is untenable for a number of reasons. You lock a man up in jail without due process of law, it's a violation of Fisher versus Pace because the Supreme Court said can't do that. Now, it's true that if he's guilty of contempt of court, he has to be tried, and somebody at some point in time has to say, the jury, for instance, or a court has to say, hey, you're guilty and we're going to punish you, and you've got to sentence the man to a certain period of time in jail. This man is in jail until he fills out the form. If he never fills out the form, think of it now for a moment. The judge says, well, you have the keys, Rick, and any time that you'll fill out this form the way we want it, you can be released from jail. Now, I guess what that means is you're 26 years old, and let's carry this out. Let's say he doesn't fill it out for 1 year. He's in the county jail. Can they hold him for longer than a year in the county jail? Well, I don't know. I know that he can't be held in the county jail for over a year unless it's a felony. But wait a minute. Contempt of court is a civil matter. It's not a felony. It's not even a crime. In fact, they say the reason they're holding him in solitary confinement is because he can't be mixed with criminals and other prisoners in there because he's not a criminal. Well, my goodness, if he's not a criminal, then why did you lock him up in jail? And don't you think that by locking a man up in solitary confinement, we're beginning to border on cruel and unusual punishment? After all, men are social animals by their very nature. It's like taking a bee out of a beehive and locking him up in a bottle over here. You know, he's going to die in this bottle over here because he has to be a member and a part of this society. So let's suppose he were to hold out for a year. Are they going to leave him there for a year? What about 5 years? Will you hold me in the Ada County Jail for 5 years for telling you the truth when I filled out that form? Or are you going to hold me here for 5 years because I lied? And if I lied, shouldn't you charge me with perjury, and shouldn't I be punished for some crime? How about 10 years? 20 years? Let's see, he's 26. Theoretically, he could live 50 more years, couldn't he? Yeah, 50 years. You know, there's only one man on the face of the earth, to my knowledge, who has ever been sentenced to life imprisonment, and it's been carried out to the letter. And that's the fellow Rudolf Hess, who's sitting over in Landsberg prison now in Berlin. They sentenced him to life imprisonment. He's 86 years old, and they won't let him out. Somehow, I don't think that the government in the state of Idaho has got enough gall to do that to Rick. Now, if at any time he relents and he fills out that 1040 form, there's his prima facie admission that he's a person that's required to do that. And if he can do that after 30 days in jail, he could have done that one day before he was sentenced for contempt. And I'm going to illustrate that another way. There's another story that's interesting here. I'm going to show you how it comes down. I went into court one time, and somebody had a judgment against me, and I think they wanted to collect money. Now, I have some strange and bizarre religious beliefs. And it's not because I claim to be a Christian, it's just that I claim that I have certain religious philosophies and beliefs. One of them is that I don't take an oath. That is, when somebody says to me, Mr. Gordon, raise your right hand. Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? No. Now, this happened, literally. You may not have ever heard this happen before, but we do that. I've done this. I don't know about anybody else having done this, but it's been done here in Ada County. Now, this particular judge, when this occurred, asked me that question. He said, you know, you're in open contempt of court. Oh, I am? Excuse me, Your Honor. I'm very sorry. I have this religious belief, and I don't think that it's right to swear an oath. Well, wait a minute. You can affirm. Your Honor, I think that the word affirm is a euphemism for the word swear. It's kind of like a balm or a salve. You know, it's like having cancer here, and so what we'll do is we'll cover it up with a Band-Aid, and we'll pretend that we don't have that. We don't have cancer. But I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll be happy to do something else. I mean, I'll answer any questions you want to ask me. But I'm a pathological liar. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard anybody say that before, but I believe that George Gordon's a pathological liar. I don't know about you, and I don't ever point my finger at somebody and say, hey, I think you're a pathological liar. And I was in the courtroom this one day, and you can just about imagine how it came down. You know, everybody's kind of shocked. You know, they're sitting there, geez, I just can't believe this guy, he admits he's a liar. Well, that's true. You see, if I'm a liar, Judge, and you want me to swear an oath, if I were to swear the oath, and then I got on the stand and lied, why, that'd be the prima facie evidence that I'm guilty of perjury. Then you'd put me in prison for 5 years, and that's a felony. And I don't want you to compel me to commit a felony. I just don't want you to do that. But that's the purpose of taking the oath, is to force you to tell the truth, Mr. Gordon, so that you won't lie. Yeah, but I'm a liar. It's like painting cow, C-O-W, on the side of a horse and then saying, well, go milk it. You see, it doesn't work that way. So I said, now, Your Honor, I'd like to bring to your attention my sincerely held religious beliefs. And they start over here in Matthew 5:33. Now, I read this right into the record, and I went something like this. Again, you've heard it said by them of old time, you shall not forswear yourself, but you shall perform unto the eternal your oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, because it's his footstool, neither by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Neither shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your communication be yea, yea, or nay, nay, for whatsoever is more than these comes of evil. Now, in addition to that, Your Honor, as I've said, I contend here that I am a liar, and the reason that I contend that I'm a liar is over here in Romans 3, in verse 2, I believe it is. No, it's in Romans 3, verse 4, Your Honor, where it says, God forbid, yea, let God be true, but every man a liar. And I'm sitting here, Your Honor, and I'm saying, well, wait a minute, I'm one of every man. I've checked this out in the original Greek, and I'm convinced that this is a correct translation from the original Greek. And I know from my own personal experience, Judge, that most men are liars, and pathologically so, and the word pathological simply means that a man has a disease, or he's in some way afflicted with a malady that he doesn't necessarily have any control over. An example of that, I went out to dinner not long ago, and somebody asked me at the dinner table how I liked Martha's cooking, and I said, boy, that was a tremendous meal, and gee, boy, it was really good, and I just really liked that. And then I went home and took 3 Alka-Seltzer. Now, I lied to her, see. What I should have said, Martha, that meatloaf was just plain rotten. And I'm really sorry to tell you this, but, I've got to tell you the truth because, I'm a truthful man. Now, I've never met anybody like that. Now, there may be a few of you out there that I've never met yet, and I don't know. Over here in James 5:12, there's a similar statement that says, you should not take oaths. Now, I recognize that that's an obscure little, rinky-dink commandment here in Scripture that really doesn't mean a great deal. See, I'm in court. I'm telling the judge this. However, Your Honor, I feel sincere about this, that I ought not to do this, but I'll volunteer to place myself in jeopardy of perjury. And if I get up there and I deliberately misrepresent the facts, if I tell you that on Wednesday I was flying through the air with my arms, and you can show that I can't fly, and I deliberately do that, and I lie, then you should punish me for perjury, and I'll be glad to place myself in jeopardy of perjury. And this judge just came unglued. I don't think that ever in the history of Idaho anybody has ever done that. Now, I'm not saying they haven't, but just none that I know of. And he said, if you don't take the oath, and if you don't swear and get up here on this witness stand, I'm going to hold you in open contempt of court, and I'm going to put you in jail for 5 days. To which I replied, Your Honor, why are you going to punish me? Is it because I'm a liar? Is that why you're going to punish me? Or are you going to punish me because I refuse to lie? Are you going to take the oath, Mr. Gordon? Your Honor, I'm going to answer every question that anybody asks me, and I'll do the best I can to tell you the facts. But I can't take that oath because it does 2 things. It violates my Fifth Amendment right to be secure from testifying against myself, and I don't believe that a liar can swear to tell the truth. And secondly, I have sincerely held religious beliefs that I don't think that I want to give up today. Bang! Take him out of here. Well, they just hauled me right out. Put me in jail for 5 days, and then they brought me back again. And they said, now, Mr. Gordon, are you going to take the oath today? And my reply was, sir, are you going to continually punish me for the rest of my life if I refuse to give up my sincerely held religious beliefs? Are you going to bring me out of jail every 5 days and then sentence me to jail again and again and again and again until one of 2 things occurs? One, I recant and give up my religious beliefs and swear your oath, or spend the rest of my life in jail because I won't. And he leaned back in his chair and he said, Mr. Gordon, what do you think I should do with you? To which I replied, thank you, Your Honor, I'm glad you asked me that question. And about 20 minutes later, no, it wasn't that long, it would have taken me 20 minutes, he cut me off. I remember. Yeah, he cut me off, And he was so mad, he was in the throes of an apoplectic rage. And he said, 7 days in jail. I felt like Shadrach. I'm about to be thrown into this fiery furnace because I will not worship your gods. And I'm sitting here going, wow, I've been in jail for 5 days. Now I'm going back to jail for 7 days. Do you know what my mental thoughts were at that time? I wonder how long it will take before he surrenders. That's the only thing that crossed my mind. Will it be 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 50 times, 100 times? You know, ladies and gentlemen, I was convinced that sometime between one period of 5 days in jail and the 100th time he sent me off to jail for 5 days, he'd give up. It's called staying power. One of us is going to win, and one of us is going to lose. And I'm such a damn poor loser that when we got out to 100 times, I would say to myself, I'm surprised that he could stay with me 100 times. Let's see if he can stay with me 200. And I think that if we got out to 200, I would say, I'm really surprised that he could stay with me so long. Let's see now if he can stay with me 400. Because you know I got a wife and 5 kids. Do you know what it costs to keep a wife and 5 kids on welfare? Do you know what it costs to keep me in jail for a day in the Ada County Jail? Now, I'm going to tell you another story here in a moment, but I want to complete this one, and I want to complete the Mitchell story, because Ada County is paying $16 a day to keep Mr. Mitchell in jail. Do you know how much tax they're trying to collect? Let's say they're trying to collect $5,000 in taxes. I don't think he owes $5,000, but let's just say he does. Well, let's see. At $16 a day, looks like about a year in jail would be $5,000, wouldn't it? What if this man never paid that $5,000? What if he lost his job and he didn't pay the money? The county's going to pay out about $5,000 to keep him in jail for 1 year. What would happen if everybody did that? Think about it for a minute. I don't know how many people there are in Idaho that don't pay or don't fill out these forms, but let's say that the government says, well, we're going to come down with a tyrannical repression and we're going to collect these taxes by distraint. You people are going to do what we tell you to do or else. Well, personally, I don't think I want to see Rick come out of jail in less than 90 days, because I think that when he does finally come out, there comes a point in time when we're going to file 4 writs of habeas corpus, one with our federal, then with our federal circuit court, and then with our federal Supreme Court. I think this man has the staying power, and I don't think he'll come out of jail until the government gives up. Now, I don't want to leave him there, and I don't want him to be a sacrificial lamb of and by himself. That's what the government wants. You see, together we stand, divided we fall. If we don't hang together, we'll all hang separately. You've heard those old cliches. It just so happens that here in this county we have 3 more people. And the 3 people that they're after that I know of, and I'm one of them. And I'm prepared to go to jail for whatever it takes. I don't think that they'll put me in jail. And if they do for 5 days or 10 days or 20 days, then I'll send my wife down to sign up for food stamps and aid to dependent children and welfare. And I think she'll qualify. And I think if they deny it, I think we'll sue them. And furthermore, I think when Rick comes out, I think he's going to sue somebody for $50,000 a day for each and every day that he's been deprived of his life. Now, if he's held in jail for 30 days, looks like about a $1.5 million lawsuit. He's a graduate from our school, and I know he knows how to write one, and I know he knows how to file one. And I know that he's smart enough to get that case qualified for the Supreme Court of the United States, and furthermore, his adversaries are going to have to defend against that suit, and it's going to cost him $20,000 to do it. Well, wait a minute. They're only after $5,000. How many tax collectors and how many judges want to pay $20,000 to defend themselves against Ricks? How many Ricks will there be? Well, I know that there's going to be a total of 4. Now, I was down in southeastern Idaho not long ago, and I talked to 12 down there. Now, let's multiply this out. If these 12 and these 4 here made 16 citizens in Idaho that won't fill out that form, I'm not going to fill it out. Now, I have to be prepared then to suffer the consequences. At $16 a day for 16 people, what are we talking about? $200 plus a day, isn't it? $200 a day for a year in jail? My gosh. Isn't that about $72,000? And what happens to the families of those people? Now let me tell you what happens to the families. Let me tell you about the Potts story. This fella, we'll call him Claude Potts because that's his name. He's a real patriot, and he's just as tough. His wife is tougher than he is. I mean, she's just alligator with teeth that you can't believe. And Claude, about a year ago, he went in to buy registration for his car. And when he got in there, he asked them, well, now what do you want me to pay this with? And they said they wanted Federal Reserve notes. And he said, well, wait a minute, I don't think I can do that. And he brought up the money issue, and he qualified that money issue, and they went through the preliminaries, and finally he went to trial. Do you know how much money they wanted? 35 Federal Reserve notes. That was to register the car. So the total amount of money that was an issue was $35. All right? So they took him to trial, and it took a day and a half. 1.5 days. I'm estimating $2,000 for the trial. And he did a marvelous job. And the jury found him guilty. Now there he is, guilty. And the judge said, I'm going to fine you the maximum $300 and 6 months in jail. But you have the key. If at any time you will pay the $35 and register your car, I will suspend the $300 into 6 months.